For as long as I can remember, something about me didn't fit. It wasn't an obvious difference. It wasn't an outrageous act of rebellion. It was more of a feeling, an invisible energy that made me feel as if I were watching my family from the outside, even though I was sitting at the same table. My brothers were the pride of my parents, dutiful, predictable, always aligned with what was expected of them. I, on the other hand, was the one who asked too many questions. The one who read instead of watching television with everyone. The one who locked herself away to write instead of going out to socialize. The one who, unintentionally, broke the mold. They never told me directly, but I could feel it in their eyes. In my mother's sighs when she said, "Why can't you be more like your brothers?" In my father's silences when he shared my achievements, always followed by a but. I grew up trying to fit in. I forced myself to talk less, to dress like them. I started studying what they told me was more practical. And for a while, it worked, at least on the surface. But inside, I felt further and further away, not from the place, but from myself. There was something broken between those around me and what I needed to feel loved. And yet, I stayed, because they're your family, because you don't leave the place where you were raised, because love, even in its clumsiest form, is hard to let go of. I didn't know that feeling of being the weird one, the different one, the one who doesn't follow the path, would one day lead me to hear something I wasn't meant to hear, something that would forever change the way I looked at them, and at myself. They never told me in words, but I felt it in every gesture, in every choice, in every silent comparison. In my family, love wasn't unconditional. It came with invisible, but very real conditions. You had to behave as expected. You had to hide what hurt. You had to look happy, even when you were falling apart inside. And I couldn't pretend as well as the others. She was not the one who followed the traditional path. I didn't get married young. I didn't have children on time. I didn't study what they wanted. I changed cities, jobs, friends, searching for something I didn't know how to name. Belonging. Every decision I made outside the family script was met with a mixture of disappointment and mockery, disguised as concern. So, what are you up to now? Always so complicated. If you just relaxed a little, you'd be happier. They didn't know, or didn't want to know, that all of that came from a deep place, from a need to find my voice. But at home, the voice that does not follow the chorus is silenced. That's how I learned to turn down the volume on myself, to laugh at my own ideas before they did. I would arrive at family gatherings with a smile that wasn't mine, with stories I edited so as not to make people uncomfortable. And the saddest thing is that, despite everything, he continued to seek her approval, as if she were still that little girl who drew something different and hoped her mom would say, "How beautiful," instead of, "Why didn't you draw something normal?" The girl grew up, but the hunger to be seen remained, and although she no longer said it out loud, she thought it every time she came home. Will they finally embrace me this time for who I am, and not for who I pretend to be? It was an invitation like any other, a dinner for my mother's birthday. Everyone would be there. My brothers, their partners, the nephews running around the house. The same old scene. And, as always, I hesitated about whether I should go. For months I'd been feeling increasingly distant, but I also missed certain things. The laughter that sometimes sounded sincere, the aroma of Mom's stew, the hope that, for one night, everything could be different. So I went. I dressed carefully. Not too formal, not too informal. The impossible balance of wanting to be noticed, but not judged. I bought a gift. One I knew Mom would like. Not for me, but because I knew she'd tell her friends about it later. My daughter brought me this. She's always so thoughtful. I arrived a few minutes early. The house smelled of memories. Everything was as usual, but I wasn't. From the very first moment, I noticed the tension. The greetings were cordial, but cold. The glances were quick, as if to keep me from getting too close. The conversation revolved around topics I didn't fit into. Children, marriages, shared routines that weren't mine. I sat at the end of the table. I smiled. I made mild comments. I waited for my turn to speak, which never came. I had learned how to do it, not to force myself, to take up minimal space. But inside, that night, something felt different, an intuition, as if the distance were no longer just emotional, but deliberate. And yet, I stayed. because one doesn't leave without a sign, and that sign was about to arrive, one that would break me in two. After dinner, I offered to wash the dishes. It was an excuse. I needed a moment alone. The sound of running water, the scent of soap, anything to give me 5 minutes away from the table where my silence had been louder than ever. I finished, dried my hands, and left the dining room. I was heading to the hallway to get my coat when I heard them. You. Low, but clear. They came from my mother's room. The door was ajar. My name came out first, like a sharp crack. I stayed still. It wasn't curiosity. It was instinct. Something inside me knew that that moment would change something forever. It wasn't shouting. It wasn't an argument. It was worse. It was an intimate conversation between people you think love you, and who, when they think you're not listening, show their true colors. "Always so strange, aren't you?" my sister-in-law would say. "Like she's on a different wavelength." "Yes, she was never like the others," my mother replied. "Always so intense, so dramatic." "I don't understand how she's still alone," said another voice. "Who can stand someone like that?" Laughter. My brother added, "She thinks she's special, but she's really just lost. She's not happy, and it shows." I felt like the floor was swallowing me up. Not just because of what they said, but because they were talking about me, as if I weren't a person, as if it were a family flaw, a lingering discomfort, a mistake no one takes responsibility for. I didn't move. Do not enter. I didn't say anything. I just stood there, my soul shrunken, listening to each word, as if they were stones falling one by one on the last corner of my hope. And when they stopped, nothing inside me was the same anymore. I returned to the dining room in silence. My coat hung over the back of a chair, as if it were still waiting for a version of me that no longer existed. I put it on slowly, like someone getting dressed after an injury. I didn't say goodbye. I didn't make a sound. I just went out. But inside, every word she had heard echoed as if they were still being said. Intense. Dramatic. Alone. They weren't just criticisms. These were the judgments of those who should have defended me when the world out there was tearing me to pieces. They were confirmations of all my suspicions. I was not loved. It was tolerated. And in their eyes, not even that. She was a nuisance, an uncomfortable presence that didn't fit into their lives, or their hearts. I walked down the street aimlessly, my steps guided by the trembling of my emotions. I wondered how many more times they had spoken about me like that. How many times had I been at the table believing I was part of it, when in reality, I was the issue. I remembered every time I tried hard to make them proud, every gift, every visit, every silence I swallowed so as not to make them uncomfortable. And then came the worst part, doubt. What if they were right? What if I was the problem? What if everything they said was true, and I simply refused to see it? But something inside me, a part that still resisted, said, "No, you're not the one who's broken." It is her gaze that was always too small to contain your authenticity. And at that moment, I knew that the hurt didn't come from his words. She came from years of searching for love, where there was only judgment. I returned home with a serene face and a ruined soul. I looked at myself in the mirror. I didn't cry, not because it didn't hurt, but because the pain had crossed the threshold of tears. It was on another level, one that transforms you without your permission. During the following days, I said nothing. I answered my mother's messages with monosyllables. I responded to the jokes in the family group with blank emojis. I followed the script. I pretended I hadn't heard anything, but inside me, something no longer obeyed. I began to look at each family memory with new eyes, no longer from nostalgia, but from clarity. I saw how she had molded my way of speaking, dressing, and acting, just to be accepted. I saw how I had downplayed my achievements so as not to cause discomfort, how I had hidden my failures so as not to be ridiculed. I realized that I had lived much of my life as an edited version of myself, and the most heartbreaking thing was realizing that they never noticed the effort. They never saw how hard it was for me to sit at that table pretending that everything was fine, and when I finally thought I had learned to live with it, I found out that I was still the talk of the town when I got up to go to the bathroom. That night, the night of the comment, the laughter, the judgment, was the final push I needed. I didn't react like before. I didn't want to confront them. I didn't want to clear things up, because I understood that you can't clear things up with someone who has never really wanted to see you. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is to explain nothing, and to change from silence. A month after that dinner, I packed my things. I didn't announce anything. I didn't ask for permission. I left no notes or clues, because I understood that whoever never asked about me really didn't deserve explanations. I left the city, not too far away, but far enough to breathe without feeling his gaze upon me. The first day in my new apartment, I felt afraid of not knowing who to turn to if something went wrong, of not having a home to return to. But that fear didn't last long. It was replaced by a new feeling, peace. Peace of not having to please, peace of not editing my voice, peace of mind not having to check my clothes before each encounter for fear of passive-aggressive comments, peace of being. I started talking to myself differently, to answer me with tenderness when the doubts that they had sown for years appeared, to look in the mirror and say, I believe you, I see you, that's enough for you. It wasn't easy. Healing is not. Sometimes I would find myself in the middle of the day feeling a strange emptiness, but it wasn't pain anymore. It was space to fill with my truth. I understood that I didn't leave because I hated them. I left because he finally loved me enough to stop begging for love. And when a woman does that, there's no going back. It doesn't matter how many times they call. It doesn't matter how many family dinners they organize. I am not the same anymore. And even if they don't say it, they know it. Because the silence of someone who awakens screams louder than any complaint. Today I'm taking a different path. No lighter, no stronger. My own path. I don't live waiting to be understood, or validated, or celebrated. I no longer need my mother to approve my decisions. Not even my brothers understand why I choose the less comfortable path. Nor am I looking for people to look at me with admiration. Because now, when I sit in front of the mirror, I finally recognize myself. I discovered that spending a lifetime trying to fit in is the slowest way to disappear. And that one does not need to be part. If to do so, one has to betray oneself. Sometimes they ask me if I will ever speak to them again. Maybe, but not from the same place. No longer from the perspective of the girl who seeks love disguised as obedience, but from the perspective of the woman who understood that her dignity is not negotiable. I have built new relationships, people who listen to me without wanting to correct me, that accompanies me without judging me. And above all, I've learned to be my own voice, to be there for me when no one else is. Because sometimes, the greatest transformation doesn't happen when others change. It happens when you stop looking outside for what should always have been born inside. Hearing that conversation was devastating, but it was also the beginning of everything. Because at that moment, amidst the pain, I heard something deeper than their voices. I heard mine, and when I finally heard her, I knew I would never silence her again. Sometimes, the hardest truth isn't the one they tell you to your face. It's the one you hear by accident, the one that wasn't meant for you, but that, upon arriving, awakens you from a lifetime of self-deception. I heard my family talking about me, and everything changed, because I understood that I wasn't the one who was wrong. It was the environment that never knew how to support someone different. Custom dictated what one could and could not be, and everything that didn't fit in was marginalized. For years, I thought I had to change myself to be loved. But today I know that when love is true, it doesn't need to mold you. It embraces you as you are. And if you're watching this, if you've ever heard something about yourself that broke you, that made you doubt your worth, that left you feeling out of place, remember this: what others think of you does not define who you are. What you choose to believe about yourself, that does matter. And if today you choose to start listening to yourself, to your intuition, to your pain, to your desire to be free, then I promise you that nothing and no one will ever be able to diminish you again, because your truth, however uncomfortable, is sacred, and nobody, absolutely nobody, has the right to silence her.